Welcome to the Honest Health Podcast with your host, Jeffrey Burke. Honest Health brings you the brightest minds in the natural products industry, as well as athletes and entertainers. Jeff will keep you entertained and informed while educating on how to be successful on your healthy journeys. Now, here's your host, Jeffrey Burke.
Hello and welcome back to the Honest Health Podcast. My name is Jeffrey Burke. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you for tuning in. It's going to be a great show today. You know, I've been telling you about all the amazing people that have been on my shows over the years, and I've been blessed to be able to reconnect with so many of them. And this is going to be one of those shows today. My guest today is Paul Schulick. Hey, Paul.
Hello, Jeffrey.
How are you?
Good to be with you again.
It's wonderful to see your face. You know, it's so funny doing radio for so many years. I never got the face, and now I get the faces, and I get to interact this way. You know, I remember 40 years of radio, I could have a bad hair day, and now it doesn't matter because that's all gone. So, you know, but it's kind of nice to be able to interact and see people's faces that you have such high respect for.
Thank you.
So I'll tell you what, before we get started, I have got to be able to give you a little bit of a background on my guest today. Paul formalized his Master Herbalist training at the School of Natural Healing under the direction of Dr. John Christopher, which ignited his passion for teaching, lecturing, and formulating. His early herbal formulations were recognized as new chapters and set the stage for a procession of singular contributions to the food supplement industry. Back in 1986, Paul formulated the products we now know as New Chapter dietary supplements, the first line of whole food probiotic nutrients integrated with holistic herbal extracts. Upon their move to Vermont, Paul and his wife Barbi began the intensive building of New Chapter, beginning in their home and then expanding into larger and larger facilities, recognizing the tremendous healing potential of ginger in the early 1990s. Paul was the first to integrate the technology of supercritical extraction into a full line of ginger products and wrote his first book, Ginger, Common Spice, and Wonder Drug. In 2005, New Chapter became the first to achieve organic certification in the supplement industry under the standards of the USDA National Organic Program, and subsequently was the first vitamin and supplements to be Non-GMO Project Verified. Over a 30-year-plus-year period, Paul formulated and launched several innovations that quickly rose to the #1 selling rank in categories, including prenatal vitamins, men's vitamins, women's vitamins, herbal formulations, mushrooms, calcium, elevating New Chapter to the leadership #1 brand. Paul has exhibited a steadfast dedication to healing others through his work, with a lifetime of contributions already behind him, and with formal induction into the Hall of Legends in the natural products industry. He contributes and continues to contribute to perpetuate his lifelong passion for healing, diving more broadly into wellness. Boy, busy world you've had.
It's a good day's work, Jeffrey. A good day's work.
I think so.
Yes.
So, you know, let's get everybody caught up. You know, it's been a while since we've connected, you know, and I've been a fan of yours for a very, very long time. What's been new in your world? What are you doing to keep busy these days?
Well, I have been going deeper into the development of the ancient arts of Qigong and Tai Chi, really discovering these deep cores of energy flows in the body. And I feel like I've understood, Jeffrey, and appreciated the contributions that herbs and mushrooms and some of these things that we can add. But what are they doing on the energetic levels of the body? So there's so much on the mechanistic levels of the foods that we eat. I've studied the anthocyanins in blueberries and the constituents that occur throughout the plant kingdom. But what's the impact on the energetics of the body and on the microbiome? I've been fascinated since 1979 in this fellow travelers that we have in what we call our human bodies. This entire microbiome of trillions of cells that guide our thoughts and our entire way of life. So how do we maximize that relationship? How do we maximize through our mind this incredibly powerful force that we have, this mind? How can we generate the power of the mind integrating with the power of the breath, integrating with the power of movement. And so all of those, and then even, Jeffrey, even the last couple of months, I've studied hydration forever. But to go back into the science on hydration and water, breathing, food, energy, all those basics. And then, we were talking before the show started about, if only we had what we know now 30 or 40 years ago with the tools that we have. I can now instantly learn about an herb that I never could learn. I'd have to go to the medical school library to learn it. So now I can just instantly, my curiosity is constantly piqued. So, so I've been all over the map in terms of, but it's still the focus is on healing, but as much on healing the spirit, Jeffrey, as it is on healing the body.
Well, and to your point, Paul, there's a lot of us out there that sometimes we get under the impression that just a pill or a tablet is going to change our world. And
Right.
I understand that we can fill cracks and crevices. We can elevate our body's functionality.
Yes.
We can do things that does make a difference. But there's a lot of things that sometimes people don't really take the focus on, like you, to your point, breathing and movement and meditation and exercise and sleep and
Yes.
stress balancing. Those are
Yes.
all parts of this. And not even just the food. I mean, there are so many intricate parts of these machines that we live in. And if we would just give everything a little bit more focus. I was talking with someone the other day about New Year's resolutions, which I think are crazy, because we always set things so far out of control that we're never going to ever achieve them. I said, maybe what we should do is just say, next year, 2025, I'm going to be better to myself than I was this year. I'm going to do a little bit more of all the good stuff and a little bit less of the bad stuff. I'm going to be a little kinder to myself because I don't think a lot of us are kind to ourselves.
Yes.
I'm going to be my number one fan. I'm going to be a marching band of one for me to keep me supported because you can't depend on that from outside sources. And I think that could make a dramatic difference. And I love it that you're pursuing all these avenues because I don't think a lot of us really take the time to give them focus.
Yeah, even as you're speaking, Jeffrey, I'm thinking, how am I breathing right now that I'm listening to Jeffrey? And can I do both at the same time? Yes, I can. I don't have to focus on my breathing when I'm listening to Jeffrey, but how deep is my breathing? Am I breathing shallow? Am I breathing deeply? Am I feeling like right now? The cortisol? How is my cortisol right now? And I feel right now that I'm talking with you, I feel safe. And I feel like as the most important question, according to Einstein, that we have to ask ourselves is the universe a friendly place? And that if we believe that it's a friendly place, then we live longer, we live happier, we live healthier. And so when I'm here, if I'm feeling as I am right now, that it's a friendly place, I'm breathing more deeply, I'm feeling more relaxed, and I know that my stress response is cooled down. And so I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned in the last, of all the things I've learned. I wrote a book, as you said in the beginning, about ginger in 1994. So what is that, 28 years ago now?
Remember it well.
Or something like that. And I still use ginger. It's still a critical foundation. And my appreciation in many ways, Jeffrey, has even grown greater for ginger. But it's part of a whole, and this was one of the issues when as we were in the natural products industry, there was the risk, or for lack of a better word, the danger of thinking that just the herb was going to heal you. And people would come into my store in 1979 and they would say, what pill do you recommend that I take? I have a headache. And my answer was always, let's spend about 15 or 20 minutes together and let me understand, like you said, well, how are you sleeping? How are you eating? And those are all the kinds of questions. And I feel like that's the most important thing that we can do, is to remind people. But that said, every morning that I get up, not only do my breathing exercises, but I also always begin my day with my herbal tonics. And so those are still, because I feel like they have a vibration to them. They're my connection to the earth. And that's what so many of us have lost, Jeffrey, is that connection to the earth. And through appreciation, one of my teachers used to say, if you're wearing a diamond necklace and you don't know that it's diamonds, the value of that necklace is significantly decreased in your own consciousness. But once you learn that how the diamond is produced and how many eons it took to make the diamond, and this is what now you're wearing around your neck. So often, Jeffrey, when I sit down to a meal, and perhaps there's some insanity to this, but I'll sit down to a meal, and almost every meal I'll do an inquiry, either through my iPhone or at least in my mind, what is this food going to be doing, and how does it doing it, and who prepared it? How did it get on my table? And all of that exercise is what generates a sense of gratitude and a sense of comfort. And that, again, I think is so critical to one's quality of life.
And beautiful points. Thank you. I think today what I see is a lot of younger people suffering with, at one time, old age geriatric health conditions at a much younger age.
Yes.
I see a food pyramid that has been completely distorted and inverted to the point where people now eat foods that they crave that do nothing for them nutritionally.
Yes.
I see a fast food industry and a processed food industry that preys on the taste buds of people, knowing all and well that the food has very little to, if any, nutritional value. I think people are burnt out, fried out. I think mental health is a huge problem in this country right now. I think the
Yes.
pandemic brought it out full force. People that had been suffering for a long time were suddenly very visibly dealing with some mental health problems. I think it's kind of a mess out there. And I think the only way we can't have anybody do this for us. We
Yes.
have to individually want to make a change,
Yes.
want to take this inventory of our body and our life on what we're doing, what we could do, and the process of everything that we're doing every day. And are we covering the bases? Are we doing the basic things that we need to do every single day? And I think a lot of us probably need to do a little self-introspection, if you will, and kind of take a look at things, because I don't think that we're doing it as a nation or as a world. That's
beautifully said. And again, you've stimulated, as you always do with me, Jeffrey, many, many, many thoughts. And what I would say is I was thinking, so what do we want people to leave with? Like, what can we practically do that's going to, in this half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever we spend together, what can we take away that's going to make a meaningful difference in my life? Because, there's millions of these things going on every day. And I would say the simplest things, like literally take 1 minute. Just take 1 minute and just breathe as slowly and as comfortably and as deeply as you can in, and then breathe out as slowly and as comfortably and as deeply as you can out. Do that for 1 minute. You should be doing like 3 or 4 in-breaths, out-breaths. Then have a nice tall glass of room temperature water that, even better, is amplified with your favorite herb. So whether it's ginger or chamomile or one of my newer favorites is saffron. In the last 5 or 10 years, I've become like a fanatic, if there's such a thing, for
Well, you have good taste.
for saffron. So it's just, and the body, as you know, Jeffrey, of science, you amplify that power of the water with a little touch of the saffron or of the chamomile or the ginger or a newer herb that I became aware of about 7 or 8 years ago for me was Cistus and Canis. That's the herb that's one of the most revered in the blue zone of the Mediterranean region. And what that's going to do is it's going to wisen up your immune system and bring down those inflammatory markers. So just amplify that nice cup of water, have a nice deep breath of air, and then that 5 minutes can make a dramatic difference in your life. And then, even then go out for a 2-minute stroll. Get up from your computer and take a 2-minute stroll. I'm lucky because I live in Vermont, but just get up and take a 2-minute stroll. And it's amazing how much better you will feel throughout the day.
You know, I have some friends of mine that they've been dealing with magnitude of stresses. And, you know, I met with them a while back and we were sitting down talking one day and I said, when was the last time you guys did some deep breathing?
Yes.
It was just a couple of them. They said, well, what do you mean? I said, let's try this.
Yes.
So I had doing deep breathing and one of them almost passed out. And I said, what's the matter? He goes, I don't think I've ever breathed that deeply in my entire life. I said, you have to remember that we have very big lungs.
Yes.
And if you're only shallow breathing, you're only getting a portion of that. And it was so funny that after 3-4 minutes of doing this, they were just like, their faces were a little flushed and, you know, they were just, and I said, you're waking up your body.
That's exactly
I said, if you take time to do this every single day, you're going to utilize more of your circulatory and respiratory system. And one was like, I can't believe how much differently I feel. And I said, you know what? It costs you nothing. It's something you should be doing anyway. Your body will always appreciate it and you'll always see the benefits.
That's beautiful. You know, that is, and then what that breathing does is it then impacts your fellow, what one of my friends called your co-pilots. Who are your co-pilots? It's your microbiome. So you've got more cells that are your co-pilots than your human cells. So the more you pay attention to them, the more they will give back to you. So I look at it as I'm a walking around compost heap. And I've got this compost in me that's going to produce all kinds of compounds. I can produce compounds like putrescine, cadaverine. They're as bad as they sound. Or I can produce volatile fatty acids that are going to nourish my system and feed my brain. So I have the choice in that compost how I nourish it. We have compost here in our house, and I wouldn't put certain things in my compost, no more than I would put certain things in my body. And so that is a really, really critical point. And again, the beauty of the herbs, like one of my absolute favorite herbs, it happens to be chamomile. And chamomile has been shown, you use the right dose of chamomile at around 5 grams, and obviously one of the most well-known constituents in chamomile is called apigenin. If you use an apigenin-rich chamomile, you will uplift your microbiome's production of important constituents that are going to dictate your immune system health. And that's because of the amplified power of the water that's coming in with the chamomile. That's reinforcing your co-pilots. So it's really, really simple, is that when you use the right herbs and the right foods, you have the best chance, along with the breathing and the mindfulness. And I loved what you said earlier, Jeffrey, about being in some ways, your own best fan. Our society is social mediaed, and we're always comparing ourselves with somebody else. And what we can do is simply through the act of loving kindness towards oneself, you're going to change your microbiome. One of my favorite studies, Jeffrey, years ago was they put people on a macrobiotic diet. And they put everybody on the same diet. And then they measured their fecal outputs. And they found that the impact of the appropriate level of the foods in the diet that would have the same impact throughout each of the individuals, when those individuals went through a period of anger or fear stress, the entire microbiome would shift. However, when the individuals were on a strict macrobiotic diet, it took about 9 months for a similar shift to take place. That same shift would take place in as short as 3 or 4 days. So that's how important it is that we monitor our own anger or fear in terms of our microbiome. And so I think that's just a critical example of the importance of the mind and making sure that we emphasize loving kindness rather than in the current period that we have lived through on a global scale and on a political scale where there's less kindness and more division and more disconnection. It's that disconnection that makes us feel that we're not safe, and that ultimately affects our co-pilots, the microbiome, and it affects, obviously, our day-to-day activity.
Touching on microbiome, at the very, 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 very beginning, when probiotics were really starting to kind of dig in and, become more than what we ever thought they were. And of course, you look today and they're just completely different viewpoint on probiotics. They
Yes.
become so essential. I remember at the very beginning, you were such a leader, with bringing probiotics and the idea of fermentation. And, around the world, fermented foods are used so commonly, and here, nothing.
Right.
So how do you think the viewpoint and the necessity of probiotics has changed from 30 years ago to today?
Yeah, it's a great question. The specificity is for the different species is remarkable. I remember a number of years ago, a study came out of Israel, which was that we each have our own fingerprint in our microbiome, and that for some people, certain foods will be good for those people, but might not be good for other people's microbiome. And so being aware of your unique fingerprint and at the same time, the science of individual species. There was a company that I became aware of in Japan. I have done a lot of work with different companies manufacturing probiotics, the different strains, and some strains can be produced very inexpensively and are not necessarily as resilient as other strains, and but they're easier to reproduce. So often when we are taking probiotics, the probiotics that we're taking are not necessarily the most resilient and the most beneficial. I have no affiliation with this company now. It's a company called Kanaka. And what I was impressed with was years ago, this is like 5 or 6 years ago now, I became aware of the work they were doing with what they were referring to as ancestral strains. These were strains that were harvested from remote regions of the earth, which were not yet disrupted or destroyed through modern agriculture and antibiotics. And these strains, when you use these strains, they would best 140, 150 other strains in their ability to stay in your digestive system and to produce high levels of some of the most beneficial compounds. So I would say that was one of the most intriguing and important discoveries I made, was discovering, oh my goodness, I thought, not exactly this, but I thought most probiotics were doing pretty much the same thing. And now what I've learned is not only are there really Olympic grade probiotics,
Yep.
but that there's also specificity. Ones that I developed a product for the gut-lung axis, for example, that would be specific for lung health. And then there's other ones for mood health, and there's other ones. So you can highlight, and this is something that has really evolved, Jeffrey, over the past 10, 20 years, is the specificity of the strains and the strength of the strains.
You know, I was always one of those people. I know at the very beginning of my career, now we're talking 45 years ago, so that's a long time. I remember that we were taught at that point in time to recommend weren't even probiotics then, they were acidophilus. And we were told to recommend them to be taken for 7 days after a
Yes.
wide spectrum antibiotic.
Oh,
And then that was it. Put them in your refrigerator and you don't have to take them anymore. So I look at where things are today and the amazing strides that have been made in this category. And I personally think that us as a nation and us as a world, we've created so many negative health conditions by our choices that probiotics have not just become something that is beneficial, but something that's absolutely hands down necessary
absolutely.
today. And if we don't put them back in, they're not just going to magically appear.
No, that's right. And we are in our foods and are being mixed with antibiotics and other disruptive compounds. So it's even more important now to make sure that we are implanting the appropriate strains. You know, it's interesting. One of the most potent things that I experienced as a kid was when my dad was a pediatrician, and in my frequent bouts with infections, my dad would put me on antibiotics. So I remember one of the times I got so sick, Jeffrey, it was scary. With the antibiotics, I just couldn't hold anything in. And my dad, in his wisdom, there was a new product out. This is maybe 50, 60 years ago, and probably 65 years ago. There was a new product out that my dad prescribed for me, which was called, I even remember the name of it. It was called Bacid. And my dad called it poop pills because he said, yeah, great, right? So, and that was, they didn't know anything about it then. But my dad, and it was amazing. It was like, oh my goodness, I could actually have a normal bowel movement after using this product when I was really getting very, very sick. And so I think that was really the inspiration for me, because I'd always had digestive problems like my dad did. And it was amazing to me. One of the first products I created in 1979 or 1982 actually was a probiotic product that was developed by Golden and Gorback. It was some of the early probiotic researchers. So, and again, realizing that we need these co-pilots to make our lives healthier and happier. That's been a major focus for me.
How do you feel about the industry these days? I mean, we have been through ups and downs and craziness and legalities, and we started at a point where people were, not really signing on. We were treated more like a luxury and not a necessity. And of course, every year I go to Expo West and I see how much bigger we have grown. And like everything, not all cars, not all cell phones, and not all supplements are created equal. So you have to do your homework. How do you think the movement of the industry is doing?
It's a great question. when I was in 1979, when we had our health food store, there were just a handful of brands. In 1982, when I started making herbal extracts, there were just a handful of herbal extract brands, maybe 4 or 5. Now there's hundreds, if not thousands of them.
Yeah.
And you can't possibly, it's very difficult to regulate and to make quality standards when you have hundreds, if not thousands, of brands. I know you're going to be with Rick Scalzo in a few hours. He founded a company called Gaia that was one of the standard bearers of quality. Their name was. I don't know anything about their leadership or quality now, but I'm assuming it's still very good. But Rick set a standard that was as high as it could be. And I believe we did something similar when I was at New Chapter. So those were the days when there were a few companies that really treated their customer as their family. And I always said this, Jeffrey, that I make the products for me and my family. And that family became larger and larger. So we had tens of thousands of customers at one point. And I always knew I'd have enough, but I was never motivated by the money. The money was never my focus. And when we did good, we did well from a financial standpoint, but it was only because I believe that my focus was solely on doing good first. So I don't know, Jeffrey, how many of those thousands or hundreds of companies where their focus is health or healing first, and how many of them are treating their customer as family. And that's what made our distinction. And so when I went to the Natural Products Expo 40 plus years ago, there were just one small floor of accounts that were there. In 40 plus years, you need a map to get around the expos, and it's just I do feel concerned that how much of it is profit motivated versus how much of it is healing motivated. And if a company should tell you first out, are we in it for the money or are we in it for the healing? And that's the key.
You know, I have always been well known about being very credible and also being very set in my higher quality way mindset, if you will, because I was very selective about people I allowed on my radio show. If I didn't feel comfortable, with the studies and with what you were doing, I would never say anything bad. It's not my style. I just wouldn't have you on. And if it was a company that had to push other people in their industry down to lift themselves up, they were not allowed on there as well.
Right.
So, but that still left plenty of awesome, great companies that were doing it right. And to your point, doing it and for a way of actually getting results and getting our satisfaction from people benefiting from the hard work and the formulating and the research, that becomes a priority mindset. And that's important. And that's very credible.
Yeah. There's really nothing that it's it's that famous St. Francis quotation, it's through giving that you receive. And I think that's ultimately what it comes down to. And the beauty is that when you're working with these incredible plants and to learn of the mushrooms that are growing in these remote regions, and they're harvested by people who love the mushrooms, and there's a product that I buy out on the West Coast, which is these incredible mushrooms, and they're fruits that they harvest in the wild, and you just can't match the life-giving value, but it's getting harder and harder, Jeffrey, to find it. And I think that's the sad part, is that we need to really stop the breakdown of our last ancestral resources, of like in the Patagonia region where there's unique fruits, or there's a special mushrooms that are growing only on certain types of trees. Those are what holds the host. It just reminded me of, I spoke years ago to the researchers who developed a cancer drug from the yew tree, and it was only, they had discovered that when they isolated one of the compounds, it was very potent, but when they blended that compound with another compound that was naturally present in the yew tree, that the cancer combating effect would be more than doubled. But in order to get the patent, they weren't able to sell the combination. And so that, in a microcosm, is part of our problem, which is that we're missing the point in the harvesting and the intensity of the potential of our healing compounds, whether it's a probiotic or whether it's an herb or whether it's a mushroom, whatever. You can grow mushrooms on grains, or you can harvest them out in the wild. And the ones that are harvested in the wild are going to make a huge difference in terms of their health-giving value.
I was at a symposium a couple of years ago, and it was all doctors.
Yes.
And I spoke for a while, and I was very well received, which was very surprising because, that's changed dramatically over the years.
Sure.
And there was a gentleman speaking about, and he actually had stood up and said, we do a lot of really great testing on pharmaceutical drugs. And he goes, in the natural products industry, some of these things they're coming up with, they're brand new. We don't know anything about them. And he actually threw the name out ashwagandha. And I just stood up. And I stood up and I said, "Excuse me?" And he goes, "You have a question?" I said, "No, I have a comment."
Yes.
I said, "Let's talk about the class action lawsuits of about 60 to 70% of the pharmaceutical drugs that come out about a year after you start running commercials to create an interest in the drug. Drugs have their places. Thank God they can be life-saving and life-sustaining."
Yes.
I said, but for you to say no testing on ashwagandha when it's been used for thousands of years with scrolls and feedback and credibility and handed down from generation to generation, from medicine man to the juju medicine and Ayurvedic practitioners, I said, I think you're speaking a little bit out of turn.
Yes.
And the audience was just silent, but I was perturbed. And I said, why can't we just blend everything together, give the patients the choice of going the way that they want to go? I said, why does the medical establishment make everything so difficult to use something natural that doesn't have all of the side effects and things associated with it, but it's a cleaner, smoother, easier transition down a road with no speed bumps for most pharmaceuticals? Why are we having to work so hard to utilize something that Mother Nature handed to us?
So, Jeffrey,
and it was silence.
One of my other soap boxes, I live in Vermont, and my senator, one of my senators is Bernie Sanders. Okay. And he gave a speech a week or so ago railing at the investments we make in nuclear weapons versus our healthcare system. And the United States is basically at the bottom of all industrialized countries in terms of our healthy life expectancy. And it's all because of our, in Japan, they spend about a third of what we do per person on healthcare. They're number one in the world, or have been number one, near the top 2 or 3 in the world for healthy life expectancy. We have a system, as you so well know, and I'm sure you have repeated this as part of your 21,000 shows. We have a system which is a profit-motivated system, which does not reward the doctor for a healthy outcome. It's not the doctor's fault. It's the way the system. Some doctors are more profit-motivated than others, but the whole system needs a major adjustment. And I don't know how that's going to happen or if it's even going to happen, but somehow, some way, that is what the snowball, the avalanche of ill health here in the United States, that's what needs to shift. And it needs to shift in terms of the Band-Aid approach to the deeper nourishment healing approach. And, you know, it goes back to something you said earlier. It's about kindness. It's about treating you as my family. And you're not the other. You're not. So that's all part of such a critical piece. And that's that. And you asked also earlier about the companies, you know, how is the evolution of the industry? Unfortunately, I think the industry is at risk, at least, of getting more towards the profit motivation. And that's really what I just, you know, it's interesting. A friend of mine is Dr. Andrew Weil, and one of the healings that he believes is going to be important shift in consciousness, and he believes that could be done through psychedelics and through an ability to shift consciousness. I don't know how else we're going to do it in terms of shifting people's consciousness to realize that we are all connected, and that there's not that disconnection is what's going to run us into more and more suffering.
I can't disagree with any of that. I agree 100%. You know, I think a lot of us, you know, a lot of my friends that are my age now are all retiring. And
Yes.
I absolutely cannot even
Right.
think about it because I have such a love and a passion for this industry. I don't ever want to go long enough when I don't know what's happening and what's new and what's coming and breakthroughs and be able to talk about them. You know, so for me, it was just a natural transition to just jump on a different kind of platform, you know, but I love it. And I have to tell you, this has been really a great time. I want to thank you so much for this today. Do me a favor. First of all, will you come back again and see us?
I would be honored to do that, Jeffrey. Thank you.
Wonderful. Now, leave everybody with a Paul Schulick thought for the day.
Okay, great. My favorite quotation, which I just think says almost the whole thing. It comes from an ancient Chinese expression, and it has to do with the movement of energy in the body. And the quotation is, "Where there is connection, there is no pain. Where there is pain, there is no connection."
Wow. Well, there's a lot of truth there, isn't there?
That's
one of those. That's one of those aha moments. I love those. I will be borrowing that, just to let you know.
Yes.
I want to thank you for being here today. It was my absolute pleasure to reconnect, and I hope that we definitely stay in touch. And I wish you and Barbi and everybody back there, you know, a happy New Year upcoming, and a healthy New Year.
Thank you,
And I want to thank
Jeffrey.
everybody. Great guest today. Make sure you tell your friends to tune in. There is so much information in this conversation that you can take with you. So make sure you tell your friends. Go to my webpage, drjeffreyburke.com, tap on the Honest Health logo, and you can go to your Spotify, and then you can listen to the audio while you're walking or on the treadmill or deep breathing. We're going to get that in. Or if you want to tap on the YouTube logo, you can watch the interview. But whatever you do, make sure you're there. Follow us, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. It's all new to me. But just tune up. Just be present. Just, you know, be visible. Make sure that you're sending out this information. I'm bringing you the best minds in the industry because they have so much to say. They had a lot to say years before, but now they got even more to say now. And it's really important to have an honest place to go for the information that can be life-changing and life-sustaining. I thank you all for a absolutely wonderful podcast, and thank you for being here today. To my wonderful friend Paul Schulick, thank you for being here. And of course, everybody for tuning in. Have a wonderful day. Take care and God bless.
Thank you.
Stay tuned for more information from the Honest Health Podcast with Jeffrey Burke. And make sure to check back often for interviews and conversations from the guests we all want to hear from. I'm John the Announcer. Thanks for listening.